I am continuing my reading. What I'm doing in this series is to read through the entire standard works of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This consists of the Bible, the Book of Mormon, the Doctrine and Covenants, and the Pearl of Great Price. I am reading in a chronological order of events, not according to publication or volume, so I will be skipping around a bit as I move along. So now we return back once more to Daniel. He is alive at this time. We continue reading. This is chapter 5. Belshazzar and his revelers drink from the vessels of the temple. A hand writes upon the wall, telling of his downfall. Daniel interprets the words and reproves the king for pride and idolatry. That night Babylon is conquered. Belshazzar the king made a great feast to 1,000 of his lords, and drank wine before the 1,000. Belshazzar, whiles he tasted the wine, commanded to bring the golden and silver vessels which his father Nebuchadnezzar had taken out of the temple which was in Jerusalem, that the king and his princes, his wives, and his concubines might drink therein. Then they brought the golden vessels that were taken out of the temple of the house of God which was at Jerusalem, and the king and his princes, his wives, and his concubines drank in them. They drank wine and praised the gods of gold and of silver, of brass, of iron, of wood, and of stone. So as I mentioned in my reading of Daniel chapter 8, Belshazzar was apparently never officially king. He was the prince royal, and he ruled as regent while his father was off in foreign lands, but he was never officially king. Now it does say here his father Nebuchadnezzar. Now Nebuchadnezzar was his grandfather, most likely, not his father. But with the traditions of writing back in these days, he would still be referred to as his father. I do want to point out when he says that they praised the gods of gold and of silver and all that, they're not saying, they weren't drinking wine and saying, praise the god of gold. No, the gods of gold, silver, brass, iron, wood, and stone, these are all their idols. They would have been praising Bel and Marduk and Ishtar, but we're calling them the gods of gold and silver because that's what their idols are made out of. Verse 5. In the same hour came forth fingers of a man's hand, and wrote over against the candlestick upon the plaster of the wall of the king's palace. And the king saw the part of the hand that wrote. Then the king's countenance was changed, and his thoughts troubled him, so that the joints of his loins were loosed, and his knees smote one against another. The king cried aloud to bring in the astrologers, and the Chaldeans, and the soothsayers. And the king spake and said to the wise men of Babylon, Whosoever shall read this writing, and shew me the interpretation thereof, shall be clothed with scarlet, and have a chain of gold about his neck, and shall be the third ruler in the kingdom. Then came in all the king's wise men, but they could not read the writing, nor make known to the king the interpretation thereof. Then was King Belshazzar greatly troubled, and his countenance was changed in him, and his lords were astonied. I gotta wonder how many other people saw the hand. We are told here that Belshazzar saw the hand and the writing. And it seems that everybody could see what was written, but I gotta wonder how many actually saw the hand. Verse 10. Now the queen, by reason of the words of the king and his lords, came into the banquet house, and the queen spake and said, O king, live forever. Let not thy thoughts trouble thee, nor let thy countenance be changed. There is a man in thy kingdom, in whom is the spirit of the holy gods. And in the days of thy father light and understanding and wisdom, like the wisdom of the gods, was found in him, whom the king Nebuchadnezzar thy father, the king, I say thy father, made master of the magicians, astrologers, Chaldeans, and soothsayers, forasmuch as an excellent spirit and knowledge and understanding, interpreting of dreams and shewing of hard sentences and dissolving of doubts, were found in the same Daniel, whom the king named Belteshazzar. Now let Daniel be called, and he will shew the interpretation. Then was Daniel brought in before the king, and the king spake and said unto Daniel, Art thou that Daniel, which art of the children of the captivity of Judah, whom the king my father brought out of Jewry? I have even heard of thee, that the spirit of the gods is in thee, and that light and understanding and excellent wisdom is found in thee. And now the wise men, the astrologers, have been brought in before me, that they should read this writing, and make known unto me the interpretation thereof, but they could not shew the interpretation of the thing. And I have heard of thee that thou canst make interpretations and dissolve doubts. Now if thou canst read the writing, and make known to me the interpretation thereof, thou shalt be clothed with scarlet, and have a chain of gold about thy neck, and shalt be the third ruler in the kingdom. It seems from this that all the other wise men and stuff, Belshazzar didn't send for all the wise men. He made a decree. If anybody can interpret this, I will give them this reward. And when the decree went out, all the wise men came in. Oh, they wanted that reward. But none of them could do it. Daniel, on the other hand, didn't care about the reward. So he didn't come. It wasn't until Belshazzar sent for him specifically that he came in. This also indicates that he is no longer a magistrate in the government. He is retired. After the death of Nebuchadnezzar, he retired. Because it says he'll be made the third ruler in the kingdom. And maybe he's still over the soothsayers and astrologers, but he doesn't seem to be a magistrate in the government anymore. And I will also say, it says Nebuchadnezzar is his father. But like I said, Nebuchadnezzar is more likely his grandfather. And that makes more sense in the fact that Belshazzar doesn't remember Daniel. And Nebuchadnezzar and Daniel were great friends. If Belshazzar was Nebuchadnezzar's son, he would have remembered Daniel, but as his grandson he may not have. Verse 17. Then Daniel answered and said before the king, Let thy gifts be to thyself, and give thy rewards to another. Yet I will read the writing unto the king, and make known to him the interpretation. O thou king, the most high God gave Nebuchadnezzar thy father a kingdom, and majesty, and glory, and honor. And for the majesty that he gave him, all people, nations, and languages trembled and feared before him. Whom he would he slew, and whom he would he kept alive, and whom he would he set up, and whom he would he put down. But when his heart was lifted up, and his mind hardened in pride, he was deposed from his kingly throne, and they took his glory from him. And he was driven from the sons of men, and his heart was made like the beasts, and his dwelling was with the wild asses. They fed him with grass like oxen, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven, till he knew that the Most High God ruled in the kingdom of men, and that he appointeth over it whomsoever he will. And thou his son, O Belshazzar, hast not humbled thine heart, though thou knewest all this, but hast lifted up thyself against the Lord of heaven. And they have brought the vessels of his house before thee, and thou and thy lords, thy wives, and thy concubines have drunk wine in them. And thou hast praised the gods of silver and gold, of brass, iron, wood, and stone, which see not, nor hear, nor know. And the God in whose hand thy breath is, and whose are all thy ways, hast thou not glorified. Then was the part of the hand sent from him, and this writing was written. And this is the writing that was written, Mene, Mene, Tekel Upharsin. This is the interpretation of the thing. Mene, God hath numbered thy kingdom, and finished it. Tekel, thou art weighed in the balances, and art found wanting. Perez, thy kingdom is divided, and given to the Medes and Persians. Then commanded Belshazzar, and they clothed Daniel with scarlet, and put a chain of gold about his neck, and made a proclamation concerning him, that he should be the third ruler in the kingdom. In that night was Belshazzar the king of the Chaldeans slain, and Darius the Median took the kingdom, being about 62 years old. Daniel rejects the gift, or rejects the reward, but he still interprets the writing. He is a prophet of God, and that's kind of his job, so he does it. I like the meaning, but I like it first before he interprets it, because look, you know what happened with Nebuchadnezzar. This is in your annals, this is in your records. God made him a great king. He did what he wanted, but he got prideful, and God had to teach him humility. But you haven't learned. And I love the Mene, Mene, Tekel Upharsin. This is Aramaic, apparently. Mene means numbered. Tekel is weighed, and Upharsin is divided, or division. So numbered, weighed, divided. That is what the literal translation is. You have been numbered. God hath numbered thy kingdom and finished it. You have been weighed in the balances and found wanting, and your kingdom is divided among given to the Medes and Persians. The footnotes say this is Aramaic for numbered, or weight and division. Now, tekel, let's take from the Aramaic word for shekel. The shekel was the primary coinage of the ancient world, and it was based in weight. So that makes sense. And I forgot to mention, there's this very, very brief Joseph Smith translation, because you will note that the original writing says Mene, Mene, Tekel, Upharsin, and then in the interpretation, it's Mene, Tekel, and Perez. Joseph Smith corrects this, changing the Perez back to Upharsin. But that's the only Joseph Smith translation in the entire book of Daniel. on a final note, and I will talk about it a little bit more in the next chapter, but this Darius the Median, placing him in history is very difficult. So we'll talk about that later, though, and I will see you there. We're actually going to go back to our histories before we read any more in Daniel.